Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Monk Yun Rou, and he's here today to share with us his new book, Monk Manifesto, a prescription for evolution, revolution, and global awakening. Monk Yun Rou is a Yale-educated, South Florida-based author of 15 books. He's a Tai Chi master and Taoist monk ordained in China. And he believes that if we adhere to the principles set forth around 500 BC, we wouldn't be in the mess that we are. But there is just enough time to commit to the Taoist way if our world is to avert the sixth great extinction. So let's welcome to the show, Monk Yun Rou.
Thank you so much. Happy to be with you.
What a joy it is to have you here. And, of course, to talk about your new book, Monk Manifesto. I mean, you have to be so proud. It seems that people are really gravitating towards this book.
I'm getting a little bit of that buzz. We'll wait and see. I don't yet know how it's doing really because it's a little early. But I am getting an awful lot of calls about it and doing a lot of media about it, so I think so. It's it's a provocative finger up your nose kind of work, and some people like that, and other people don't. But we'll see. In the fullness of time, we'll know what effect it has in the world.
Well, and for our listeners that are new to you, why don't we start a little bit about your background, because You're extremely intriguing with the background that you have, and also, what your name means.
Yes. So, soft cloud is the translation of Yun Rou. And, I guess when I was given that name, there was a part of me that was hoping for Thunder Fist or kind of, a name like that, and I was worried that, it seemed a little namby-pamby at the first moment that I heard it, and then, later I realized what an absolutely beautiful Taoist name it is, and what an evocative image, floating weightlessly, through life without resistance and going with the flow as beautifully as a cloud does. But at the same time, having enough moment to produce, thunder and lightning and hail when necessary. So it's this beautiful combination of grace and elegance and power. And frankly, I'm sure I don't deserve it. So I love the name. Yeah.
I think it's very fitting with the books that you and the subject matter that you've taken on, in the world.
So, yes, you asked me about my background a little bit. So I think the most essential thing to know is that I, like many other people, was born a seeker. So I've always had this proclivity, this sense that there's more to life than what we are told and what we see, and that we're looking at the surface of the pond of things, and that, what lies beneath is compelling and fascinating to me. And so, from an early age, I kept trying to stick my head under the water and see what was down there. And, just as a tangential point, but I guess somewhat related, I have this lifelong passion for turtles. And I keep a few as pets, but I'm very interested in turtle conservation and the plight of turtles in the world, especially in Asia, with development and farming and consumption and traditional Chinese medicine extinguishing turtles from the world at such a pace. And I sometimes wonder whether my reason that I love turtles so much is that they are creatures who do exactly what I just described, meaning they are they can live on land, they can paddle on the surface, and then they can dive down and see what's underneath. And I always thought, what an amazing three-dimensional life they must have, and they fascinated me from childhood.
Well, that is absolutely fascinating. And when I was a kid, my first doll was a turtle. So like,
really,
and he had,
wow.
yeah, he had this little, of course this was like 70s. He had this little denim shell with a little pocket on it, and I used to stick things in his little pocket. Whatever I felt was important at the time, drag him around with me. So I get that. Yeah, so when we have, when we look at, the animals that we share this planet with, and just the vast amount of knowledge and wisdom, and, there's so many messages there for us just in how we should be in relationship to the world around us.
It's interesting. The book that I'm writing now, the follow-up to the manifesto, is actually, and this is the first time I've publicly mentioned this. It's a book about the wisdom of turtles, and in this book I enter a kind of Taoist dream time where I travel the world talking to turtles in different circumstances on many continents, and learn, what they have to tell us about the way to live and the way to treat the rest of the sentient world. So when you talk about the animals with whom we share the planet, the most important message, of course, which is one that is sadly lost in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Abrahamic tradition, I guess I should say, and that is one that I would like to see let go of, is the idea that we are separate and distinct from the rest of nature, that we have to save the planet or save nature or protect nature. The presupposition of such a statement is that there is a dichotomy between us and the rest of nature, and that simply is an illusion, a fabrication. We are nature. We are the planet. It runs through us. It motivates us. We are part of it just as surely as a turtle is. And so that this idea of separateness, alienation, that same alienation that drives so much suffering and angst in our culture, is all illusory. And the sooner we abandon that view, that dualistic us and them view of the rest of life, the sooner other sentient beings will benefit from our largesse and our participation, our kinship and our connection, and the sooner we too will feel the fullness of the connection with nature, which is just not only an essential, but the essential part of our being.
Do you feel that's the number one plight we're kind of faced with at the moment?
So, really, frankly, and I say this as a Taoist monk who has his predilections and preferences in terms of philosophies and framing of life in the world, but honestly, nothing about our politics, our society, our culture, our religions, these gods that live only between our heads, between our ears that we fabricate, and the stories we tell us that live in our heads. Listen, I love story. We're on a conversation together because of your love of story and mine. I recognize the importance and usefulness and majesty and beauty of legends and myths and story. It is my stock in trade. It's pretty much my favorite thing. But nonetheless, all those caveats and exclusions having been said, if we have no habitable planet and we cannot survive, then the rest of all that is a moot. So if we continue to destroy the earth as we are doing, then we will all perish. And so, regardless of the Russia investigation or the Chinese excursions into Africa or any other thing that happens to, the spats in the South China Sea or dictatorships in Africa or Venezuela or Brazil, regardless of the political things that occupy our headlines, the truth is that environment is the only gigantic global story, because without a place to live, nothing else matters.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, and it's interesting because we are a society that is so kind of just into materialism, consumption. We look at, just technology. It really, while it connects us, it really, kind of rips us apart from nature as well.
So, when you mention our society, we should be as blunt and unflinching in this conversation as I am in the manifesto, the Monk Manifesto. Mm-hmm. The truth is that although there is a lot of spin about our country being a nation of ideals and founded on a utopian document and all that, the truth was quite a bit grittier and more complicated because, we Caucasian white people came to this country from Europe to escape taxation, to have their form of worship be not tolerated because it was tolerated there, but to be the primary one or the only one. And in essence, to commit genocide upon the civilization that was here when we arrived, and to engage the second financial, economic war, which was slavery. So, in other words, our country, when you mention the materialism and technology, our country was founded on a material impulse, which was to pay less taxes and to enslave other people for profit. And we were willing to commit genocide to do that. And we have remained essentially not a nation in the sense that many other older cultures are, that is cohered by a past history or by values or by religion or by beliefs or by character, but rather in service of profit. So if you take the long view, well, you can't take a very long view since the United States is a very young country, but if you take as long a view as you can of this country, you can see that, where we are is a natural consequence of where we began. And it's been the trajectory all along. And now what we have a marketplace more than we have a nation. And people come here because it's a good place to do business, and they're freer to sell their products or do their things. And I'm sorry if this sounds sort of unpatriotic or a little bit judgmental about things, and it's certainly not the only characteristics of our country or the only reason that people come. But more and more, this is the overarching flavor of things. And so, we have a mall, and all these different Americas that people talk about are, like the different stores in that mall, and they each have a different window full of different goods, and they perhaps cater to a different clientele, and they might have, different deals going on at one time. Mm-hmm. But the different Americas are primarily united by the fact that they're all residing within the mall. And so these stores are all in the mall. And unfortunately, what happens when Walmart or Kmart or, Target or any big box store, which is united as a dictatorship is in China or Russia, those stores, not everybody is happy, and people work for too little money, and they're forced to make the deals that they don't necessarily think are right, and on and on and on. But they do so because they're in service of the leadership of the store. And so, when Walmart meets the mall, sadly, the mall doesn't win. And so what we're going to see now in the world is that, the mall of the United States is going to come up against the big box of the Chinese economy primarily, and it's not going to be good for us. But we continue to embrace this model as what it is to be a country and what it is to be individuals. And so we're kind of getting what we're asking for, which is a sad thing.
Well, it's really interesting because when we view things on the basis of marketplace and consumption, just kind of where we are as a civilization at this point. And in your book, you talk about personal evolution and social revolution. So what does that mean to you?
So, the way out of this conundrum, the way out of this situation, is that we have to reframe what we think a country should be. And to do that, we have to reframe what we think a state should be. And to reframe that, we have to reframe what we think a city should be, and a village should be, and a cohort should be, and a family should be, and then finally what an individual should be, or must be, or what we want it to be. And so in Monk Manifesto, I constructed the book in that opposite direction. So I start with the rock falling into the water, and our personal decision and change is the rock. And the impact of the rock in the water creates ripples, and those radiate outward. And we cannot control any of that. All we can control is the rock. That's us. Once we fall into the water, what happens is beyond our control. And those ripples may go out all the way from, our family to our neighborhood, to our town, to our state, to our country, and then into the world. And we can't and shouldn't need to or worry about controlling how those ripples move. But we do need, and this is a very quintessentially Taoist idea, we have to pay attention to ourselves, not in a selfish and self-aggrandizing way, not in a hubristic way, but to pay attention to ourselves, because that's where the work needs to be done and where we can do it. We cannot control other people. We cannot control those ripples, but we can control us. So if we get a clear set of beliefs and values, and we live in accordance with those, we become more powerful and the ripples become stronger.
Do you feel that our disassociation with nature has kind of brought us to the place that we are?
So I think that that Abrahamic flavor of our culture is at the root of things, but there are other elements. So, for example, when we talk about the Abrahamic faiths, the context in which I'm making this comment is that we have a novel we call the Bible, written by multiple authors, and in that novel, there's a character we call God. There's another one we call Jesus, another one we call Moses. All these things are wonderful characters who are very rich and interesting and often have very valuable and important lessons for us. But there are some things in there which don't jive particularly well with a planet Earth, with 8 billion or 10 billion people on it. I'm not sure what it is now. So one of the things that doesn't work in the current level of population and situation on Earth is this idea of hegemony over the natural world. So any story that says, listen, this planet, all this is for you. It's for you, people who are made in God's image, to do with as you wish, to have as your playground or your sandbox or your toilet or your garbage dump. This kind of thing, just like other things in the Bible about prejudice, about people's sexual orientations, or about races, or about violence, all these things, have to be seen in the context of the time the novel was written. And they could be great for that time. And this is not throwing out the novel we call the Bible in a dismissive rage. On the contrary, I love a lot of those stories. A lot of them are archetypal in our culture. I think they're fabulous. I'm trying to point out that it's not our sandbox. We are not alone here. We are not superior to or standing above or having hegemony over anything. We are citizens of the planet, not rulers of the planet. And if we view ourselves as beings whose fate is inextricably entwined with the future of the rest of the world, then it suddenly matters whether we step on the frog, run over the turtle on the road, shoot the bear, destroy the hilltop, plumb the oceans, and pull out everything that's alive there and return to it plastic, and on and on. You know, if I went into your home and it was smeared with feces and floating in urine, and there were beams falling down and rot and mold everywhere, and there were poisonous chemicals wafting around, and I said to you, my goodness, you know, what kind of a place to live is this? How could you treat your home this way? Boy, and I'm thinking to myself, there must be something wrong with you. There's something wrong with a person who lives that way. And yet that's exactly what we're doing with the planet. So whether it is because of the reinforcements of religion, remember, you know, religion, we made up all those rules ourselves. So they had to come from somewhere deeper that was before that religion existed. So there was always greed and always self-service and always hubris. But they are not the only characteristics of people. They're just the unpleasant ones. There are some wonderful characteristics of the violent monkeys we call people. And so we have to put our attention to compassion and frugality and humility. Compassion in how we treat each other and all other sentient beings. Frugality in how we treat our resources so as not to exhaust them. And humility in terms of how we see ourselves and who we think we are.
Well, in saying that, when you wrote Mad Monk Manifesto, who did you write this with? You know, who's the audience that you wrote with this in mind? Was there a specific group of people, or is it everybody?
You.
That's perfect.
So I mean, you know, I know I took your breath away with that, but actually, you know, look, you know, I know. So of course, but I'm in some ways quite serious, right? Because for someone who finds resonance in the material and in this way of looking at the world, for whom maybe not everything in my book is something you agree with, but that all of it is thought-provoking and makes you re-examine. I don't want to say makes you because that's a little not quite the spirit of the book, but helps you, exhorts you, and inspires you, best of all, to re-examine some of your presuppositions and values and behaviors and help you make your own way forward into change. Anybody who is described by what I just said is the audience of this book. And of course, it's easy to say that it's best for college kids, you know, who are in that, that questing, self-examining, growing time of life. But I think it's also equally appropriate for people who are retired at the other side of life, who now have time to reflect and think about what they have done and what they continue to do and what they want to do, and most of all, who they wish to be before they die, right? And everybody in between those two poles, right? So I have teenage students who read and enjoy the book, and I have college kids who are reading and writing me about the book, and I have captains of industry who are reading and writing me about the book, challenging my assertions about capitalism and about profit. And for example, the idea that business is not about profit. This is a very iconoclastic idea in our culture, but the truth is business is about the provision of services and goods and about providing jobs to a community, and profit is entirely, it must be, a distant third. So that's a blasphemous concept in America, but it's one to which we must return. And there are many other sort of instigatory but important ideas too in the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, just as earlier you talked about the rock dropping in the water, it's interesting when we have books like these that, in a sense, are the rock that make that wave. We never know where it will reach and who it will touch, but the impact has been made. So, it'll be interesting to see how people look at our planet and with your book, decide, hey, I want to start doing things differently. Whether it's going vegan or just being very conscientious about consumption, it can change in a lot of different ways. People can make adjustments.
So, a few things here. You mentioned, so first of all, I want to say that I get these letters. Sometimes they're emails, sometimes they're physical letters from people whom I either don't know or who I met years ago and know slightly. And they've read the book, and they're writing me to tell me what a difference having this book has made to them in their lives. The book has only been out a couple of months. I mean, it's amazing that I'm getting any of this. It takes a little time for people to get around to a book and also to read it. Sometimes you buy it, but you don't read it right away. I know I have a stack of books that I'm working my way through all the time. And so I continue to be humbled and grateful to receive that kind of letter and know that this is going out in precisely the way you just described, which is that in ways I could not predict, really. The other thing is, too, that regarding the ripples, the idea of controlling the ripples, of controlling the effects of things, is so burned into our culture that the whole concept of controlling our own lives and the world around us is part of what has led us into this terrible pickle. And, the Taoist view of this is really quite different. It's much more about surrendering. It's much more about the least effort and the maximum result. It's about efficiency and effectiveness, but it's about sensing the flow of things and figuring out how to go with it, not against it. At the very beginning of our talk, you asked me about my background, and we kind of didn't do much there. But I do want to say that, having been born a seeker, I had this wonderful advantage, which is that I was born the son of a man who was for decades arguably the most famous heart specialist in the world. So people from all walks of life came to him, and I saw kings and princes and captains of industry and Hollywood moguls and stars and, billionaires and just people who were at that time the folks who ran the world. And what I noticed as a little boy, seeing these people in a parade through my parents' apartment in New York City, was that despite the fact that they had everything that we were all told we should want, so they had fame and power and beauty and riches and so on, many of them were dramatically unhappy, and many of them were no better or more evolved or balanced or deep or profound or wonderful people than anybody else. In fact, a lot of them had more than their share of miseries. And I remember seeing those people and thinking, wow, if I've been told that that life is exactly the life that I should want, they have everything that I'm told we all should aim for, but they're not really particularly happy or giving more to the world or even getting more from the world than anybody else, then I've been sold a bill of goods here about the purpose of life and what's important in life. And if that's true, what other bills of goods have I been sold by our culture, unwittingly by my parents and family and friends and community? What have I been sold about religion? What have I been sold about politics? What have I been sold about economics? What have I been sold about country? All of that. And so, I began this quest, and because my mom was a student of the famous Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, she had quite a good philosophy library. And so as a little boy, I was rummaging through those books looking for answers. And of course, those books are inaccessible even to graduate students. So, as a child, I was understanding very little. But I did have a little bit of a zing from reading them anyway, a search for wisdom, and particularly so for the works from East Asia. So that's how I began this trajectory.
I think it's interesting. I look back on my path, and it's most of the times it's a squiggly line that takes us to where we're supposed to be anyway. And a long time ago, I had someone tell me, if the ocean is salvation, there are many rivers that lead to it. So, I look at that from a consciousness standpoint, and we really end up where we're supposed to. And obviously, you're exactly where you're supposed to be with the insights.
Well, thank you for saying so. I would say that if your life was a squiggly line, you're doing great. Mine is usually sort of a jagged peaks and valleys going backwards, up, down. It wasn't so smooth to get here. I'm not a spring chicken. It took a little while.
Well, we could obviously talk for hours on not only your book, but just your inspiration, your life. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners where they can connect with you and be part of your community.
Okay, great. Thank you. So first thing is to go to www.monk, M-O-N-K, Yun Rou, that's Y-U-N as in Nancy, R-O-U.com. That's my website, which is sort of the gateway to my works. And when you get there, you'll find that there's a fork in the road. You can either click on Tai Chi and that kind of training, or on books, and each one leads down a path of its own. I'm also on Twitter as Monk Yun Rou, and I'm on Instagram as Monk Yun Rou. I'm not on Facebook. And I'm on YouTube too, but all of those things are accessible from the website.
And they can go there. Well, Monk Yun Rou, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you very much for the honor of having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Monk Yun Rou, for taking the time to be on the show with us here today and to share your new book, Mad Monk Manifesto, a prescription for evolution, revolution, and global awakening. You can pick up Mad Monk Manifesto at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.